How's it going, everybody? This is Dominic Minchella, joined by Zach Gilbert. We are your Kansas City Chiefs on SI beat writers. I take care of the podcast while Zach is boots on the ground inside the building as we cover the Kansas City Chiefs going into the first week of the season of the NFL campaign. The Chiefs are likely already over in Brazil, training, getting themselves ready to take on their AFC West division rivals in the Los Angeles Chargers. I know I'm excited. I know Zach's excited. And for this podcast episode, we are going to be diving into our final thoughts about how this Chiefs franchise and roster has transformed from the final day of the 2024 season into the 2025 season, specifically talking about what their ceiling is record-wise and floor is record-wise. Zach, would you want me to go on first?
Yeah, go ahead. You lead it off, Dom.
Awesome. So today, I specifically want to talk about how I originally made a prediction way back when the schedule came out, just looking at things on paper on how the Chiefs' schedule looks. And I came up with a record prediction of them finishing 13-4. Now, that was months ago, and a lot of factors weren't contributed, such as injury and suspension, so to say, specifically for Rashee Rice. So now looking at it with a little bit more intel, especially going into the season, I would kind of adjust my prediction and record prediction and say that I can see a world where they finish less than 13-4. It's crucial that they kind of get out of the gates hot, especially with Rashee Rice off of the roster for the first 6 weeks. There's a lot of tough competition within those first 6 weeks. And if they can't come away rather, with hopefully a 2-game advantage over their win and loss record going into their bye week, I would say that the latter half of the season could be very interesting for the Kansas City Chiefs. I think a lot of the pressure in the wide receiving room is going to be leaning on Xavier Worthy. And while it happened last season, we saw it, there wasn't a whole lot of production. There was a lot of rookie mistakes here and there. And how are we supposed to feel confident going into the new season if Xavier Worthy doesn't pick up from where he left off? Near the end of the season, he was starting to kind of figure it out, pieces together. But a room with Xavier Worthy and Hollywood Brown kind of leading the charge without Rashee Rice, there is room for error. And I think that could greatly benefit or dismise the Chiefs going into the first 6 weeks of the season. What were your kind of thoughts on where you think that their ceiling is for record-wise?
Yeah, Dom, I think just looking back on last year, this team won 15 games. They lost 2, but that last one, I don't really count it because they were resting all their starters and lost to end of the season to the Broncos. But this team, I think, it really got pretty lucky winning some of those games. In fact, this year, the Chiefs are entering the season riding an NFL record 17 straight wins and 1-score games. And I think that some of those wins last year could have gone either way, and it just happened to benefit the Chiefs on a few of those. So I look at 12-5 as a pretty realistic goal, and that's not to take away the team's ability to get back to the Super Bowl, to win the AFC again, to even win the Super Bowl. I think 12-5 is more realistic for this team. I see them winning the AFC West again, their 10th straight division title, but it's definitely going to be a few more losses this year. And I agree with you. I think that first, not just the first 6 weeks, but the first half of the season, all the way up through that Buffalo game right there in the middle of the year on the road, going back into Highmark Stadium to play Josh Allen again. It's just a brutal schedule. I mean, you lead off with the Chargers, and then you've got Super Bowl rematch in week 2 at home against the Eagles. and they go on the road against the Giants in New York. They get Lamar Jackson back at home, Baltimore Ravens in Week 4, Monday night, and Jacksonville. Then they get Dan Campbell and the always formidable Detroit Lions back at home. Uh, they host the Raiders. They host Washington and Jaden Daniels. And then they go to Buffalo, and they have to play Buffalo on a short week because that game against Jaden Daniels in Washington is on a Monday night. So it's just a brutal first half of the schedule, and it gets a little bit easier after that. But who knows at what point they're going to have injuries and other issues to deal with. But I see them losing a few of those in the first half.
Yeah. So I've been seeing a lot of things that go on just throughout the media, whether it be any news outlet source and a lot of opinion pieces from analysts, specifically surrounding on how they view their floor. And some people have, and I'm sure you've seen it throughout the offseason, have predicted that the Chiefs just missed the playoffs entirely. Either the Broncos or the Chargers step up and they take the division and all that. But I say it all the time on the podcast, to be the man, you have to beat the man. And over, at least since the turn of the decade for the Kansas City Chiefs, they're still the man to beat, so to say. So much so that I think that a floor for them, while it might not be, I still think that they find their way into the playoffs, whether they win the division or not. Because as soon as they get into the playoffs, we know how Patrick Mahomes and company perform. His floor has been, losing in the AFC Championship game in overtime. It's kind of I don't necessarily think I find it hard to doubt them should they punch their ticket to the playoffs to not get to at least the conference championship game. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, yeah, I see. It's interesting. ESPN, they always put out this analytics-based simulation of the season, and this year they took a different track. They rather than take the aggregate results of their 10,000 simulations, they just picked one of them, and in that one simulation, they just went through what the heck, and it had the Eagles and the Chiefs missing the playoffs, just barely missing, and some both Super Bowl teams were out. I think in the NFL, anything's always possible. The other thing you have to look at, I think, 9-8 could be a reality as the floor for this team. But the other thing you have to look at really is the Super Bowl hangover. Teams that lose the Super Bowl the last few years, they've really struggled. Whether it was when the Chiefs beat the Eagles in 2022, the Eagles, you might remember, they rebounded. I think they won their first 10 games, and then they just completely collapsed all the way through their playoff loss at Tampa Bay in the wild card round. And that was Jason Kelsey's last game as a player. And then the 49ers, after the Chiefs beat them in 2023, the 49ers just fell off the map. They finished in last place. And so the Super Bowl hangovers are pretty real. But I think the Chiefs are different just because they have Patrick Mahomes, and they've proven they have the confidence that they can overcome adversity, unlike those other teams.
Yeah. So let's end the podcast with this final question in the first 9 weeks of the campaign before their bye week. I want to know who you think is going to be their most difficult or tough opponent. I would say, for myself, before getting to your thoughts, I would say that it's kind of a toss-up between, that when they go into Buffalo, a lot of the narrative is that the Chiefs lose to the Bills in the regular season, but when they see each other in the playoffs, the narrative gets flipped. So I would say one of their more difficult opponents this season is kind of in the middle point of the year in the Detroit Lions. And here are my reasons why. One, that's the final game that the Chiefs have without Rashee Rice, meaning that I think that the Detroit Lions are probably going to look at that as an area for them to capitalize on, like knowing that, they're almost at the stretch of their suspension, losing one of their top wide receivers. Let's knock them off their axes. And on top of that, the last time that the Lions and the Chiefs played one another, it came down to the wire, finishing with a 1 point difference. I think that the Lions are going to be a very tough opponent, especially because they too have a lot of doubt going into this season with their coordinators both leaving and people assuming that their Super Bowl window is closing. As that narrative is there, you see a franchise that they were projected in facing in the Super Bowl last year through several projections in the Kansas City Chiefs. And I think that the Lions are going to give them a run for their money. Not saying that that the Chiefs are going to lose that game, but saying that it could be one of the more difficult games for them to win. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would not be surprised to see the Chiefs win those games. I think if you look back at last season for the Lions, it was actually week 6 that they lost Aiden Hutchinson to a broken leg of just on a freak play where his leg just wrapped around and smashed into an offensive lineman. And, in Dallas, the Lions were a different team, so you never know what type of injuries are going to affect the team. And I would say I would not be surprised to see the Chiefs win those big games against teams that were in the playoffs last year. But I think they really need to be careful about taking care of business during those trap games, like week 3 on a Sunday night at the Giants. Maybe Russell Wilson is still their starting quarterback. Maybe Jackson Dart has entered the fray by then. That is a trap game. Abdul Carter, I'm not sure how he's going to do against Josh Simmons and Jawan Taylor on the Chiefs line. Jacksonville on a Monday night. Travis Hunter. Talk about a trap game. We don't know what Trevor Lawrence is going to look like. And then obviously the Raiders. The Raiders always come into Arrowhead and play the Chiefs tough. They beat them on Christmas Day just 2 years ago here in Kansas City.
Yeah.
So I would not be surprised to see the Chiefs struggle to be a few games over 500 going into the bye, but then really hitting the gas in that second half of the season, just as they always do, and find a way to get back into the Super Bowl. I wouldn't be surprised if that happened.
Yeah, well, it is football's here. I'm excited. I know Zach's excited. But today, that's going to wrap up the edition of the Kansas City Chiefs Insider Podcast. Thank you once again, Zach, for coming in. I know you've got a busy schedule out there. I'm excited to continuously have you on the podcast and hopefully get some more insight for you inside of the facility.
Sounds great. Thanks, Dom.
Awesome. All right. So, as always, folks, you should follow me over on X at Dom Minchella. I post and repost every single day. Be sure you follow Zach as well at Zach S. Gilbert. We post often. You're not going to want to miss any coverage of the Kansas City Chiefs on SI as we get closer to the regular season. And be sure you follow us over on our main page at KC Chiefs on SI over on X. As always, ladies and gentlemen, have a good one. Be kind to one another, and I'll see you tomorrow.